Hello and thank you for joining us on this episode of On the Block with Mem and Pete. We appreciate you being here. Today we're going to be discussing the difference between an STO, an ICO, an asset-backed token, and a IPO. Stay tuned.
So there's quite a difference in a utility token and a security token. So I'm going to break it down for you into simpler terms so you can understand. So both utility tokens and security tokens are very similar. They're structured in a very similar way to an IPO, so an ICO, utility or security token. It's a form of crowdfunding. So just like an IPO in the traditional markets, investors are allowed to buy into the project or the company at a discounted price before it hits the market.
So wait, when it's an IPO, the initial public offering, if you get in before the IPO, that's when you can get at a discounted rate.
Right.
Okay. Right.
So it's the same with an ICO, right? Before an ICO goes onto the exchanges, you get it at a discounted rate. Where it
if
could
you're
be
whitelisted,
right.
or if you're private Telegram chat or whatever else, you can get. They call it a bonus, right? So
Exactly.
you're getting more coin for the amount of money that you're putting out.
Right.
So that's what happens with ICOs.
Right.
So does that happen also with STOs?
Yes. So an ICO STO is the same thing pretty much, but a utility. The difference is in the tokens itself, whether it's a utility token or a security token. Now, a utility token, you don't actually own any shares or any stake in the company itself. What you're getting is a token that is based on a service that the project is providing, right? So these utility tokens you see that raising all this money, if they go bust, then you lose your money. It's not actually tied to the company itself. You're not buying a stake in the company. So they're a lot more riskier than an STO. Now, an STO is actually deemed as an investment and it goes through all the regulatory hurdles they have to go through to get properly regulated by the SEC and allowed to sell their tokens. So it's actually, a security token is tied to actual securities.
Right. So that security can be many things. So first of all, the SEC is for America. The United States of America has
right.
the SEC. Other jurisdictions, other countries have similar sort of things, but I mean, SEC is one of the most strict. So if it kind of abides by SEC rules, it probably abides for rules across probably the world. I mean, there's different laws for each one, but how you position a security is different for each country, but there is frameworks and, like Pete mentioned, hurdles that you have to jump through to get the right frameworks in place.
Right. And
so it's a lot more difficult to launch than an ICO.
Yeah.
STOs are significantly harder to launch, but that protects the consumer a little bit more.
Right. They're actually protected in a lot more ways than a utility token because
utility you're not protected.
You're not protected
anyway.
at all, really. So with a security, it could be tied to actual digital shares of the company, the revenue of the company. You can do a security tied to real estate. We saw one in Boston at Token Fest that they were tokenizing fine art. So by buying the security token, you're actually buying a piece of that art. Mm-hmm. So the piece of art will go up in value over the years, so will your security token, right. Your STO.
So security token, there's also another class of tokens now too. It's called asset-backed tokens. So asset-backed tokens can be an art token, right? So the asset is the piece of art, and the token is a representation that you own that piece of art. So let's say it's a Van Gogh. So one piece of art, let's say that it's $10 million. I, as an investor, can put in $1 million, so I own one token, but that token represents 10% of that piece of art, right? So that's an asset-backed token.
Right.
Now you can, we're seeing companies actually start to do this with real estate even. So you guys probably know that real estate is looked upon as one of the safest investments that you could make, especially in a big city like New York or London or even Toronto here. However, it's very unaffordable for the average Joe. Like, not everyone could just go and buy a house in New York. It's very expensive to do. What some realtors and some developers are doing is actually tokenizing the actual entire unit or the entire home, and you can buy a share of that home. So as the value of the home increases, your share increases. So that share is the token. And anytime you want to sell that token, you can do so through a security exchange. And we think security exchanges are going to be huge. Pretty soon, in a couple of weeks, we'll have a friend of ours that's launching a security exchange. He's going to be he'll be a lot more knowledgeable about what securities are, what security tokens are, and how securities even work, and how it works when you digitize a security.
Yeah, and we're going to have him on, actually. We're going to do a interview with him. He's in Europe right now traveling, so once he's back in Canada, we can get together and set that up.
Yeah, so that's really the difference. So an ICO, no one had any obligation to you whatsoever. You can be anybody and invest into it. It's really just like Kickstarter crowdfunding, but you didn't get anything except for a token that in the
it's
whole
speculative,
yeah,
right?
You were speculative. You thought, okay, you know what? I like this project. It looks like it's going to be pretty cool. They had a great white paper out, but as it turned out, most of these guys were, they just didn't have. Maybe they weren't scams. I'm not saying there weren't any scams. Sure, there were some scams, but there was a lot of companies that thought that they could do something, but they just didn't have the technical know-how, or they didn't know what they were doing when it came to their business acumen or whatever it is. And right now in this bear market, you're seeing a lot of those coins go away, and the people that put money into these ICOs, into these shit coins, basically they're left holding the bag.
Yeah.
They have nothing and no one that they could go to and say, hey, look, these guys took my money. It was the Wild West, but now you're starting, because regulations are coming in, you're starting to see a lot more of the smart money moving to the space, and smart money tends to want to protect itself, so that's why they're doing this securitized tokens.
Yeah, so I mean, not all ICOs, like utility tokens, went bad. I mean, a lot that I invest into skyrocketed. So like, it's not all bad. We don't want to scare you away from investing in utility tokens, because there will always be a place for utility tokens. But securities is not just a way to go for investors, but for companies that want to raise money, especially if you're a small startup. It's very hard to get VC money. They don't want to invest into something that's brand new. They wait until their money's come in, there's revenue, and then they invest into it. So security tokens are a way for smaller companies to have access to not just funds in the country that they live in, but global funds. So it makes a lot of sense for smaller companies to do an STO. And a really good fact that shows that the IPO market has taken a hit because of ICOs and STOs. So in 2018, this year alone, the ICO market is about 45% of what the IPO market is, which is crazy when you think about it, because these didn't exist years ago. Like, there was no ICOs, that you couldn't crowdfund this way. Now that there is, a lot of companies are moving more towards this type of funding than the traditional IPO, which, it's a lot harder to get to that stage, that IPO stage, and get that VC money. So STOs are changing the game.
Yeah, 100%. So when it comes to IPOs, just like STOs, maybe even more so, you have to jump through a lot of hurdles, right? You have to get lawyers involved. You do have to with STOs too, but with ICOs, you didn't have to. You literally could put up a website. You could write your white paper out. If you had an existing company, you said what your company was doing. You already had the website. You talked a little bit about it, and then you said, okay, here's how this is what the utility of our token is going to be, and you said this is when it's going to be released. Here's where you can send your money to. it was Kickstarter on steroids. That's what ICOs were.
Yeah.
And because of, whenever there's an opportunity like this, you see bad players come into the market, but also you see governments and bankers wanting to make their cut and they feel they're being left out. Like the SEC ultimately says they're trying to protect you, but really what they're saying is, here's the rules that I've put into place. You have to abide by these rules, so you have to pay me and my lawyers and everyone else to make sure that you abide by these rules. And if you do, then we'll put you on the New York Stock Exchange or the whatever stock exchange, right? That's the way that companies went public, and that was their liquidation event, as they called it. So now liquidation events were an ICO, right? It was so quick to liquidate. As a founder, you can go in, have an ICO, say what your product does, say what your goals were, and then liquidate right away through the sale of your utility tokens. And once you sold them, you've collected all this ETH or Bitcoin or even fiat currency, and now you have money to actually execute on that. The negative part is now you have money to not execute on that.
Yeah, to gamble in the markets, right?
Right. So gamble in the markets, hop on private jets, go to conferences, whatever the heck you wanted to do with that money. Now you had the ability to do it. I think security tokens is a good little middle ground right now between IPO and between ICO, right? You still get some shares in the company. Like for instance, we talk a lot about Ripple and why we think it's a shit. We talk about XRP and why it's a shit coin. Because XRP and Ripple, we say it interchangeably, but they're not really the same thing.
XRP is a token that comes under the Ripple company, right?
Right.
So Ripple as a company have all these partnerships and doing all these great things with financial institutions, but I don't see how that reflects, like the XRP token reflects that, because it's not really, when you buy an XRP token, you're not buying shares in the Ripple company. Exactly. It doesn't work like that.
If Ripple themselves decided to go the traditional route and go to IPO, then that token, that XRP token, really isn't worth anything. No. Right? I mean, they'd have to be dicks to do that. Like, they could just say, you know what, we're going to reward the people that have been holding our coin, and we're going to go this way. But they could also say, nah, we don't need to do that. We're going to go traditional route. We're going to go and do an IPO. Or they could do a security offer. See, this is where a security offering for Ripple would be such a great thing, right? Because then you actually own a part of Ripple, the company that has all of these partnerships and are doing all of these things. Right now, XRP is just a utility token. It's not really tied to the Ripple company itself.
Right, and what is the utility for it? A lot of people believe that the banks are going to be using the XRP token to transact money globally. But if you actually dig deep and look into it, the products that Ripple have, XRapid, XCurrent, and I think XVR, they don't actually use the XRP token. So what is it for? I really don't know. Unless they've got something up their sleeve that we don't know about, I just think it's completely speculative. I do think it will pump because I've seen it pump over the years. Like the first time I bought into Ripple, it was like 3 cents, sold it at 10 cents, Then I bought back in at like 60 cents, sold it at like 2.50. Now it's back down to like 50 cents again. Will it pump up again? Probably. But are these partnerships, these financial institutions actually going to use the XRP token? I don't think so personally.
Anyways, coming back to security tokens and STOs. So let's just rewind back here. So STOs, security token offerings, right? That's what they're called. So security token is it the same as an asset-backed token, or is that?
Yes, it's a security.
Okay, so that's a security. So basically, this token that you will now start to acquire, we think in the next year or so, you're going to see a lot more STOs out. This security token that you buy will actually be pegged to something. It will be a security of that company, or it'll be asset-backed, so it'll be real estate, art, whatever it is. So that is actually worth something whereas a utility is speculative. If the utility has a means in the actual software, it makes sense. Like, you have to have that token there to verify things or whatever it does, whatever the utility of that token is. But other than that, the price of it fluctuating and going up and down is very speculative. That's why it's actually good as an investment, because, you know, high risk, high reward. You still can make a lot of money through that because it is very risky. But because it's very risky, you could also lose a lot of money. So that's why you have to do a lot of research when you're going into any of these utility tokens. Make sure that the company is doing what it's saying it's doing. Make sure there's actual people putting work behind it. See how their financials are. I mean, you have to treat it really, really carefully. And I mean, it's your hard-earned dollars. Just make sure you know where you're putting it into.
Yeah, do your own research.
100%.
Don't just listen to your friends telling you to buy this ICO or buy that ICO.
And don't just listen to us either. Continue to do your research and make sure you get what you're looking for. So that's really the difference between STOs, IPOs, and ICOs, and asset-backed tokens. If you guys have any questions, leave us a comment below. We'll try to get to it and respond to it. Other than that, please subscribe to our channel and smash that like button. Yeah, smash that thumbs up button and ring that bell. Thanks, guys.